Now, once again, automatic transmission test 5. Okay, and we like to start out with some true-false questions here, because you know, the 50-50 part of that is usually, if there's the Murphy's Law thing, means if there's two ways you can do it and one of them is wrong, wrong is the way you'll do it. Right? You ever seen that? If there's two ways, it'll go on there and you put on one. So if it's true and false, then you're just winging it. Now, pass out these comprehensive finals with quite a few questions on them in our open book. Usually, see, what happens if you take that final the first time, you get the only way you can get full credit on every question is to get them right the first time. Well, let's say that you take them and you just sort of wing it. And you say, well, I'm not, you won't make it. What happens is you wing it, and then we grade it, and you get a 40 or a 50 or a 60 maybe. Oh, man, that's a horrible grade. And so I hand you the final back, and you get to go back and try to fix the ones that you missed, but you only get half credit on those. And sometimes if you make a horrible enough grade first time around, you can't recover, and you got to start over with a different final. And typically everybody gets a different final that's different from everybody else's final, so nobody even has any of the same questions, you see. So, you know,
teaches us to get it right the first time.
Yeah, it pays to get it right the first time. And you'll burn some time on it if you do it right. And that means you'll be reading that book. You know what I'm saying? You're going to read the book, and this is part of what we do. I tell you stuff that's not in the book that I need to tell you during these sessions here, but when you read the book, you're filling in some more holes. See what I'm saying? We're trying to fill in as many holes as we possibly can. And that's part of it. And so let's jump into this automatic transmission test. 5, some friction discs are steel on both sides and have no friction material.
False, false.
And that's actually true.
What?
That's actually true. Some friction discs are steel on both sides and have no friction material. That's true, believe it or not. A bushing is a type of bearing.
False.
That's true too. A bushing is a type of bearing. Is actually when you got to tear an automatic transmission apart and you look down in there and you see those little brass bushings in there that's got little channels cut for the oil. You look at those things real close. You want to make sure the number wiped out.
Cylinder-shaped thing.
Yeah, it's a little cylinder-shaped thing that something spins inside of. It's kind of like it looks like a cam bearing or something. You know what I'm saying?
There usually be in a narrower spot where a shaft goes through, and maybe some seals on the shaft interact with it.
Not really. Usually, it's just basically carrying that shaft so it'll spin smoothly without rattling around and all that. And it's actually got the little fluted channels or, you know, oil being fed to it, so it will keep lubricated. Because you don't really want metal contact. You want oil in between there. You know, that's the thing on that. So that's the type of bearing. The clutch is operated by mechanical pressure. Now this is automatic transmission. Now when I say the clutch, don't be thinking about a clutch and a pressure plate. You know what I mean? The clutch is operated by mechanical pressure. That's actually false. You don't actually have any piece of linkage pushing on those clutches. You've got fluid going in there. And that's actually operating. It's shoving on a piston. It's pinching those clutches. How many of you guys ever worked on a motorcycle clutch? You know how you got the fiber to steel and the fiber to steel when you pull that, you know. It's the same kind of deal, except those are mechanical on most of the older motorcycles. But this particular one, and I'm not a motorcycle mechanic, so don't ask me any questions about that. But I do know that on the automatic transmissions, whenever that piston's applied, that's when your clutch is actually. And remember what I told you, the accumulator. What's the accumulator for, guys? The accumulator is actually the fluid flows.
Okay, well, like when you get pressure going into it, it'll suppress the spring in the back, and then I can't damn it.
You're talking about the valve?
Huh? No, accumulator, and it kind of levels out the fluids later on when it releases the valve from the top and then puts pressure back, so you're really not losing anything, but damn it.
It actually cushions the application. That's what it does. It's got to fill that up and it squeezes that spring and then it applies so it doesn't hit quite so hard every time. Because, you know, that's objectionable to some people. And on some of the transmissions, they'll detorque the engine at the point of the shift. The engine controller can synchronize that so it knows when it's about to make the shift, and so it takes away some of the engine torque so you barely feel it. You see? And all that. But yeah, there you go. All right. Well, you were kind of on the right track. A roller clutch is a two-way clutch. No. A roller clutch or a sprag. A roller clutch has rollers rolling on ramps. A sprag's got little bow ties.
That's that thing I was asking you about yesterday.
Exactly. And the one you had, we had a little sprag on there. I mean, but part of all these automatic transmissions, they're going to have a clutch in it that only turns one way. And in rare instances, you can actually put that thing in upside down. The little needle bearings, a little round needle bearing, it looks like a washer, but it's actually got little needle rollers in it that you've seen. You know what I'm talking about. If you put one of those in upside down, it'll just come all to pieces.
I was looking at that. If you sit there and flip it one way and try to move it around, it won't feel right. And if you flip it the other way driving and moving around, you can tell which way it's supposed to go.
I had a boy that did a Dodge transmission here back years ago. It was a A500 Dodge transmission, one with the overdrive piece on the back of it. And he did an absolutely superlative job building that transmission from one end to the other. I mean, it was great. The only problem he made, the only mistake he made, and it was a big one, was he put that bearing, that little needle bearing, it looked like a big silver washer, you know, but it's actually got little needles you can't see in there. Anyway, he put that in there upside down, backwards, and you can actually look at it and tell when it's backwards, but he just figured one way or the other it don't matter, but it did matter. And I even wrote a Motor Age article about it, because that thing exploded in there, and it filled the whole transmission up with metal particles and everything, and it wound up causing a bunch of valves to stick, and he had a booger of a time ever getting it to go into fourth gear again. It was just awful. I mean, he worked most of the semester on the thing trying to get it straightened out. Now, Daniel and Abby are fighting with a transmission that she's got that's, you know, giving some issues. But did you notice, Abby, how fast y'all got that transmission out the second time? You know, the first time you had to hunt and poke and figure out and try to find the right wrench and all that kind of stuff. But if you looked at them over there, they were wah, 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 they pulling all kinds of stuff loose. And Daniel told me, he says, it took me only a couple of hours to do what took several days to do last time. But I mean, he just blew that thing apart, got it on the bench, took it apart, and it was just that fast. And somebody that does those transmissions all the time can just, you know, wham, 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 you know. There's a big transmission shops. The ones that I've known about, they'll have a guy that pulls them and puts them back. They'll have a guy that tears them down. They'll have a guy that puts them back together.
That's how Adams operates. They got two on that do that, pulling out and putting in part, and two on the inside that rebuild.
Yeah, and they're wanting them done quick. You know, and basically how that works. But they've got the one that I knew about, there was a transmission shop that I was used to hang around because I had a friend that worked there down in Port Arthur, Texas, called Paul's Transmission, and he had to pull out and put it back in. I mean, he had a puller out, or, you know, R&R man, and then he had a teardown guy, and that teardown guy would tear it all down, and he'd put all the parts out on the bench and clean them up and everything. And then the guy that built it back up knew his transmissions well enough to where he could just, you know, slam all that stuff back together, and they'd throw it back in there. And Paul also kept some transmissions that were rebuilt on the shelf. And occasionally, if he had a problem transmission that kept coming back giving him trouble, like if the guy could, well, it's still not shifting right and all that kind of stuff, he would pull that transmission and put another one just like it in there, you know, that was to see if that would take care of it. And if he did, he would just say, you know what I'm saying? The difference in somebody that's just building that one transmission and somebody that does them every day is if you do a lot of transmissions every day, you got a lot of parts laying around. And so if you got a burned up planetary gear set, a lot of times you'll have one over here that you can put in there, you know, that's the right one and all that. And so alternator shops the same way. You know, if somebody's rebuilding starters and alternators, they can come up with all kinds of parts that the rest of us ain't got. You know, and that's one of the things that you just get really good at that one thing. And I'm going to probably rebuild the starter on my F525 John Deere lawnmower when it finishes going out, because it's $600 for a starter for that John Deere lawnmower. I'm not going to play that game. All right. A worn or warped drum surface can be visually inspected. Well, you can visually inspect anything, but you won't always pick up the problem that way. So that's going to be a falsie. You can look at it, but you may not see it.
You can always visually inspect, though.
You can visually inspect anything, but you may not catch what's wrong. That's the point. You know what I mean? Can you look at a brake rotor and tell that it's warped? Not usually. I mean, or that it's got parallelism problems. Yeah, but as far as the actual pulsation thing, if you held a rotor in your hand somebody brought to you and they didn't tell you anything, you could mic it and tell. But if you just looked at it visually, you wouldn't be able to do anything with it. And when you put it on your lathe and start turning it, you're going to pick up on that, you know. All right, the piston return spring must be removed before the piston can be serviced, and that's true. You can't take the piston out of there. The piston return spring being what? You know, when you push these little the thing down, you take a snap ring off, and you got all these springs in here. You know what I'm talking about? Some of them have one big spring. Most of the ones we've been fooling with have got a bunch of little bitty springs around there. And when Mike, a guy I used to work with back in the 70s, would build that guy was so doggone fast, he could pull a 350 turbo hydromatic out, and he could put it on the bench, tear it apart, get all the, seals and clutches put back in it, and whenever he was ready to put it back in, the torque converter was still warm. That's how quick he was. The torque converter didn't even have time to cool off. That's how fast he was on that particular transmission. And he would, And sometimes if the whoever was driving the truck, you know, Redneck Joe or whatever, wanted a firmer shift, he would leave about half the springs off of that, you know, half the return springs off, so that it would apply a little more solid, you know, stuff like that. There's a bunch of little tricks you can do. When you put a transmission shift kit in there, you're changing some accumulator springs and drilling some holes and one thing and another in it. Huh?
Putting a new check ball in.
Yeah, there's different things, you know, that kind of stuff. These are some guys over here one time built an RE401, and they had to clean the valve body, you know, a couple of 3 times before he got running. And they got in such a hurry cleaning that valve body, and it was a complicated son of a gun. There was a ball that was supposed to shuttle back and forth between one hole and another, you know, in the valve body. And there's a 7 or 8 or 9 balls in there, and they'd put them balls in there right a bunch of times, but somehow there was 2 of them working on it, and they put a ball in each one of those places where that was supposed to shuttle back and forth. You know, instead of having one ball to go back and forth, they had a ball on each place, and little holes wasn't about 3/4 of an inch apart, or a little less than that. And you know what that transmission did? When they took off all of that, when it shifted to the second gear, it locked the wheels up. It's just because they put 2 balls where there was only supposed to be 1. You know, they put a ball out of place. I mean, it can make all kind of crazy stuff happen. It's pretty intimidating, actually, you know what I'm saying? If you ain't real careful, you scare you when you start looking in there. Okay, clutch pack cannot be modified.
False.
That's false. Some clutches use single-sided friction discs. That's true. The clutch is housed in a transmission or transaxle case. Okay, and then finally, number 10 on the true-false plate clearance or piston travel measurements must be made after installing the clutch assembly. Okay, that's false, actually. Plate clearance or, yeah. All right, you don't install it, you check that beforehand. And, you know, I will tell you this. They show, in the books, they show people with a feeler gauge checking that. You don't usually see somebody that builds transmissions every day checking that with a feeler gauge. Not usually. Most of the time, they'll just stack it together and they can look at it and tell when it's good enough, because that, you know, they know about how much travel that thing's got. I mean, it's got a heck of a lot. You know, you're not right. If it's too tight, where it's you know, got those clutches pinched all the time, it ain't good either. So if it's got a little bit of rattle in there, then most of the time that's what they look at. Number 11, which is not an applied component used in a typical automatic transmission or transaxle. That's number 11. Two-way clutches. That's not an applied component. Let me see. That's going to be, okay, the blank seal is commonly used to seal the piston to the drum bore. That's a C, the D-ring seal. All right, now, which of the following is not a type, now you'll see that in your book. Now, I'm not going to dig into that real heavy. Which of the following is not a type of clutch band? C. Triple wrap heavy duty. All right, number 14, which of the following is not a servo linkage design? Huh? Which of the following is not a servo linkage design? Curved link, that's A. You got lever, cantilever, and straight link, but you don't have a curved link. Number 15, a clutch steel plate that has slots cut in the surface is called a, number 15, that's not going to be a C. That's a turbulator plate. Okay, now let me get a, I'm going to do something here. This is a, I went through that pretty quick, but I'm going to show you guys some stuff that I've been meaning to show you.